I was standing in the cereal aisle at Kroger on a Wednesday afternoon, trying to remember if my wife had asked me to get the one with the blue box or the yellow box, when I saw her, my daughter, standing by the self-checkout with a cart full of groceries, my grandson sitting in the front seat of the cart, chewing on the corner of his jacket sleeve the way he always does. She hadn't seen me yet. I watched her for a second, the way you watch someone when they don't know you're looking, when you get to see who they really are when nobody's performing. She looked tired, not just regular tired, the kind of tired that lives behind a person's eyes. I walked over. She saw me when I was about 5 feet away, and her face did something complicated, like she was happy and scared at the same time. She smiled, but it took a beat too long. "Papa," she said. "Hey, sweetheart." I hugged her. She held on a little longer than usual. I picked up my grandson and kissed the side of his head. He smelled like kids always smell. That specific combination of graham crackers and something warm and clean. He grabbed my ear immediately, the way he always does, and I pretended it hurt, and he laughed. I looked at my daughter's cart, noticed everything was store brand. Generic cereal, generic soup cans, the off-brand dish soap. Now, I want to say something here. There's nothing wrong with store brand anything. I'm not that kind of man. But my daughter, her name is Lily, grew up comfortable. Not rich, but comfortable. Not rich, but comfortable. Her mother and I made sure she never had to choose between the things she needed, and I knew for a fact that her husband Brendan had a good job, project manager at a mid-sized construction firm in Columbus. The salary for that kind of work is nothing to dismiss, so the generic dish soap caught my attention. "You doing your shopping on Wednesdays now?" I asked, keeping it light. "Yeah," she said. "It's less crowded. Where's your car?" "I didn't see it in the lot." She paused, just a half second. "But I'm her father. I've known her since she was 3 pounds of nothing in a hospital blanket. I know every pause she makes." "It's in the shop," she said. "How long has it been in the shop?" Another pause. "Longer this time?" "A few weeks." I looked at her. She was looking at her son, adjusting his jacket sleeve, very busy suddenly with that task. "How are you getting around?" "Brendan drops me off when he can, or I take the bus." I let that sit for a moment. My daughter, who lives 12 miles from the nearest grocery store, taking the bus with a toddler in January in central Ohio. "How long is a few weeks?" I asked again. She finally looked up at me, and I saw it. I don't know how to explain what a father sees when he looks at his child and understands that something is very wrong. It's not one specific thing. It's the collection of small things that individually mean nothing, but together mean everything. "Can we talk?" she said quietly. We went and sat on one of those benches near the pharmacy section. She put my grandson down and gave him her phone to watch something, and then she folded her hands in her lap the way she used to do when she was a little girl about to confess something she'd been carrying for too long. The car wasn't in the shop. Brendan had taken it. Not taken it the way a husband borrows his wife's car. Taken it the way someone removes a tool from someone who might use it to leave. It started, she told me, about 2 years into their marriage. Small things at first. He'd check her phone, ask where she'd been when she came home from seeing her friends, make comments about how much she spent at the grocery store, not fights exactly, just a slow drip of comments that made her feel like she was always slightly wrong about everything. Then his mother, Darlene, started coming around more, every weekend at first, then several times a week. Darlene had opinions about how Lily kept the house, how she cooked, how she dressed. And Brendan would sit there and let her say these things, or sometimes he'd agree. In front of Lily, in her own house. When Lily tried to talk to Brendan about it privately, he'd say she was being sensitive, overreacting. That his mother meant well and Lily needed to work on her attitude. I sat on that bench and kept my face very still. I've learned over the years that when my daughter is telling me something hard, she's watching my face to see if she's safe to keep going. If I react too strongly, she stops. She protects me from the rest of it. So I kept my face still. She kept going. About 8 months ago, Brendan had told her that they needed to consolidate their finances. They'd had separate accounts since they got married, a joint one for household expenses, and each of them kept a personal account. That's what her mother and I had always done. It's a reasonable, healthy arrangement. But Brendan said it was creating distance between them, that a real marriage meant shared everything. Lily had agreed. She trusted him. He moved her direct deposit to the joint account. Then, 2 weeks later, he moved the administrator access on that account so only he could transfer funds out. He didn't tell her he'd done this. She found out when she tried to transfer money to pay her own credit card, and the system said she didn't have authorization. When she asked him about it, he said he'd just restructured things for efficiency, that he'd handled the bills, that she didn't need to worry about money stuff. She was 31 years old and she no longer had independent access to her own income. I thought about that for a moment. I thought about how that happens, how a person doesn't just wake up one morning and let someone do that to them. It happens in layers. It happens after enough small indignities that your sense of what's normal slowly shifts, like how you don't notice the temperature dropping degree by degree until suddenly you're cold and you can't remember when it happened. When did he take the car? I asked. 6 weeks ago. What reason did he give? He said it needed an oil change. He took it to get the oil changed and then he just didn't bring it back. He said he was using it for work because his truck was having transmission issues. But his truck is fine, Papa. I've seen him drive it. He parks it right in front of the house. And your license and registration, is everything in your name? She nodded. The car was a gift from you and Mom. It's in my name. I nodded slowly. Does he know you're here talking to me today? She shook her head. He thinks I'm home. He dropped me at the library this morning. I walked here. The library was 9 blocks away. She walked 9 blocks in January with a toddler to get to a grocery store so her husband wouldn't know she was out, and then she happened to run into me. Or maybe it wasn't entirely an accident. Lily, I said carefully, is there anything else I should know? She was quiet for a long moment. My grandson was still watching his show, completely unaware of any of it, and I was grateful for that. She told me that Darlene had started staying at their house. Not visiting, staying. She had taken over the guest room 6 weeks ago, around the same time the car disappeared, and together, the two of them, Brendan and his mother, had started making comments about Lily's family. About me. About her mother, suggesting that her parents had never really supported her, that we'd raised her to be independent to a fault, that her attachment to her family of origin was the thing standing between her and a real marriage. They were trying to cut her off, one at a time, layer by layer, the same way they'd cut off her money and her car. They were isolating her. And she had a 2-year-old son in that house. I said, okay, just that word, okay. She looked at me like she expected something bigger, and I said, you didn't do anything wrong. None of this is your fault. I need you to understand that before anything else. She started crying then. Not dramatically. Just quietly, with her face turned slightly away, and she wiped her eyes fast like she'd gotten used to not being allowed to take up too much space with her feelings. That was the part that got me, if I'm being honest. Not the car, not the bank account, not even Darlene. It was the way she cried. Quick and contained and apologetic. My daughter used to cry at commercials. She used to call me after emotional movies just to talk about how the ending made her feel. At some point in the last few years, someone had taught her to make herself smaller, and I had not noticed it happening, and that sat in my chest like something heavy. I told her to finish her shopping. I told her I would walk her to the bus stop and I would carry the bags. And while we walked, I asked her several careful questions. I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with before I did anything. I spent that evening on the phone. First, I called my attorney. I'd used the same family law firm for 20 years, originally for a business partnership dispute, and I'd referred so much work their way over the years that they pick up when I call. I explained the situation. Financial control, isolation tactics, a vehicle registered in my daughter's name that had been withheld from her for 6 weeks. My attorney listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I've always respected about her. She told me what I needed to know. In the state of Ohio, a vehicle registered in my daughter's name could not legally be retained by her husband without her consent. What Brendan had done with the bank account, restructuring access without disclosure, potentially constituted financial abuse, which is recognized under Ohio domestic violence statutes. She told me what documentation to start gathering, and she told me to have my daughter call her office directly in the morning. Then I called a man I've known since we were both working construction in the late 80s. He runs an investigative firm now, licensed above board, the kind of operation that works with attorneys and insurance companies, and occasionally with fathers who need to know what they're actually dealing with. I gave him Brendan's name, his employer, the address of the house. I told him I needed a clear picture of what was happening financially and whether there were any other issues I should be aware of. "How soon?" he asked. "As soon as you can." I didn't sleep well that night. My wife, Renata, sat up with me for a while. She'd known something was wrong with Lily for months and had been trying to figure out how to approach it. We talked until past midnight, and somewhere in there, I told her that I was going to fix this, and she said, "I know you are," with the particular tone she uses when she means it. What my investigator found over the next 10 days was not surprising, but it was confirming. Brendan had been telling his employer that he used his personal vehicle for client site visits and had been submitting mileage reimbursement claims using Lily's car, so he had essentially been profiting off a vehicle he didn't own. He had also opened 2 credit cards in the last 18 months that Lily had no knowledge of. One had a balance of a little over $9,000. The spending pattern on that card was not consistent with household expenses. Hotels in downtown Columbus on weekday afternoons, restaurants where you don't take your toddler. I will not describe how I felt when I read that report. It doesn't add anything to tell you that. What I'll tell you is what I did. My attorney sent a formal letter to Brendan's personal email, and his attorney, she'd found out who he used for his business incorporations regarding a vehicle. The letter stated clearly that the vehicle was the registered property of my daughter, that its retention constituted civil conversion under Ohio law, and that it was to be returned within 48 hours or we would involve law enforcement. The car was in Lily's driveway the next morning. The letter also requested, on Lily's behalf, that her direct deposit be rerouted back to a new individual account, which my wife and I had helped her open at a different bank entirely. My attorney copied Brendan's HR department on the relevant section about the mileage reimbursements with documentation. He was placed on administrative review by his employer within a week. Darlene left the house 4 days after the car came back. I don't know exactly what Brendan told her, but she was gone. And then Lily had a decision to make. I want to be careful here because this is the part that matters most, and it's the part I could most easily get wrong. It was not my decision. I had given her back her car, her access to money, and the name of an excellent family law attorney. What she did with all of that was entirely up to her. I told her this directly. I sat at her kitchen table on a Saturday morning while my grandson ate banana slices, and I told her that I was not going to tell her what to do. I told her what I had found out, all of it, and I let her sit with it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she asked me if I would help her find an apartment. We found a 2-bedroom in a complex about 4 miles from our house, with a good elementary school nearby for when the time came. Her mother helped her move her and my grandson's things over a weekend while Brendan was out of town for work. Work that, as of the following month, he would have significantly less of. Lily called me the evening after the move was complete. She was sitting on the floor of the new apartment surrounded by boxes, my grandson already asleep in his new room, and she said, "Papa, I can breathe." That was the whole conversation, more or less. She said she could breathe, and I told her that was enough for tonight, and we stayed on the phone quietly for a few minutes the way we used to when she was in college and homesick. Here is what I keep thinking about. I keep thinking about how long it had been happening. Not the car, not the bank account. Those were just the visible parts at the end. I keep thinking about the years before that, the comments that made her doubt herself, the slow erosion of her confidence until she was a woman who cried quietly so she wouldn't take up too much space. I keep thinking about the 9 blocks she walked in January, and whether some part of her was hoping she might run into me. I should have been paying closer attention. I'm her father. I should have seen it sooner. But here's the other thing I keep thinking about, the one that I hold on to when it gets heavy. She said something to me on that bench by the pharmacy in Kroger before we even got up to walk to the bus stop. She looked at me and said, "I didn't call you because I thought I was supposed to figure it out myself. I thought I had to just try harder." And I told her, "You never have to figure this one out yourself. That's not what fathers are for." She's doing well now. She got a new position at the accounting firm where she'd been working part-time, full-time now, with benefits. She and my grandson come over for dinner on Sunday nights. He sits in the same chair I sat in when I was small, at a table that's been in our family a long time, and he eats whatever Renata puts in front of him, and then asks if there's more. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. Brendan's attorney tried several things that didn't work. What was documented, and what was documented was enough. Lily has her own bank account, her own car, her own lease, and her own life. She laughs at commercials again. Last week, she called me after she watched some movie on Netflix and talked for 20 minutes about the ending, and I sat in my armchair and listened to every word. That's the whole story. That's what happened. If you're listening to this and something about it sounds familiar, not the details, but the feeling of it, the way a person can lose access to their own life so gradually that they don't notice until they're walking 9 blocks in the cold. I just want you to know that the way out exists. It's not always easy and it's rarely fast, but it exists. And if you have a daughter or a son or anyone you love, stay close enough to notice, not to interfere, just to notice. That's the whole job when it comes down to it. I've been turning this whole thing over in my mind for months now. Not the part where I made the calls or found the apartment or sat across from my attorney and went through the documentation line by line. That part was just work. I know how to work. What I keep turning over is the 9 blocks. Lily walked 9 blocks in January with a 2-year-old on her hip and groceries to buy and a husband at home who thought she was somewhere else. 9 blocks because she didn't have a car, because the man she'd built a life with had decided, quietly and deliberately, that a woman with no transportation and no independent access to money was easier to manage than one who had both. And here's the thing about that kind of slow, calculated control. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't show up one day with a name tag. It arrives as a conversation about efficiency, a restructured bank account, a car that just needs a quick oil change. It arrives wearing the language of practicality, and by the time you recognize it for what it is, you've already adjusted. You've already started apologizing for taking up space. You've already learned to cry quietly. Brendan didn't become who he was overnight. And Darlene didn't drive 4 days away the moment things got difficult because she was a reasonable person who'd made one bad call. What happened in that house was the result of choices made consistently over years. Every time Brendan made a comment that made Lily doubt herself and face no consequence, he learned he could do it again. Every time he took something and gave a reason and she accepted it, he learned he could take more. That's how it works. Not in one dramatic moment, but in 1,000 small ones, each one teaching a lesson about what's allowed. The other side of that is also true. Every time Lily took a step, walking those 9 blocks, letting herself sit on that bench and finally say the words out loud, calling the attorney's office the next morning even though her hands were shaking, she was learning something too. She was learning that she still had agency, that she could still act, that the part of her that knew something was wrong had been right all along, and it had been worth listening to. I think about my grandson eating banana slices at our kitchen table on Sunday evenings, completely unaware of what his mother went through to get him to that table safely. He'll never know the version of the story where she stayed, where she kept trying harder, the way she thought she was supposed to, where his grandfather didn't happen to turn down the cereal aisle at the right moment on a Wednesday afternoon. I'm not taking credit for her courage. She's the one who walked those 9 blocks. She's the one who sat on that bench and let herself be seen. She's the one who packed the boxes and signed the lease and showed up to work full-time while building a new life from scratch. All I did was hand her back the tools that had been taken from her and remind her she already knew how to use them. What I want anyone to take from this, if you're a parent, if you're a friend, if you're the person in the situation yourself, is that clarity is not the same as simplicity. Knowing the right thing is clear. Doing it takes everything you have. Lily knew, somewhere underneath all of it, that what was happening to her was wrong. She'd known for a long time. What she needed was not to be told she was right. She needed someone to sit down next to her and not flinch, stay close enough to notice. That's the whole job.